Alright guys, that was Villainous Crew. Now let's move on to the next villain team. The next villain team that I'm going to introduce is Shadow Seas. I'm going to go ahead and explain the origin story and where I got the ideas from and the powers and abilities that these characters have. But without further ado, let's get started. And also I do want to say these villains are actually villains for Super Spirit X and mostly the Pirate Penguins. But let me go ahead and introduce the characters. Alright, so the first character that I'm going to introduce is the leader of the team, Shadow Eyes. Now, Shadow Eyes, she's obviously a mermaid, and her real name is Nora Fisherman, and I'll explain her origin story in a minute. Next character is Sharky and Super Orca, and I'll explain their origin stories in a minute. Next character is this robot character, Charger, and his real name is Edward Wilson, and I already explained his origin story in the Super Spirit X video if you guys want to go check that out. Last but not least is this character, the Grease. This is my drawing of Shadow Eyes, and that's the drawing of her with the mermaid tail. Again, I'm not that good at drawing, but it's fine. This is my drawing of Sharky and Super Orca. Again, not that good at drawing, but it's fine. This is my drawing of Charger. He looks pretty cool, honestly. Last but not least is the Grease, and honestly, he looks pretty terrifying. But okay, time to give you guys where I got the ideas from. Now, Shadow Eyes, obviously I really wanted to create a mermaid character because I am a big fan of like stories about mermaids, and what inspired me, of course, was a little bit of Aquaman, but also obviously the Little Mermaid. And Shadow Eyes, she has the ability to be a mermaid and human. Like basically, when she goes in water, she turns into a mermaid, like she gets her mermaid tail, but when she's not in water, she turns into a human, but her feet are basically the fins. Next up is Sharky and Super Orca. I obviously wanted to create another version of Bebop and Rocksteady for the Pirate Penguins. And although the killer whale, the orca, is like one of my favorite sea animals of all time, and I obviously wanted to create a shark character that's also part of the ocean. Now, Charger is actually more like an evil, like not a clone, but like an evil version of Steel Metal. And I kind of already explained his origin story in the Super Spirit X if you guys want to go see that video. Next character is the Grease. Now, what inspired me to create this character was the Loch Ness Monster and Swamp Thing from the DC show, or the game Injustice too. Now, the Grease, he's actually a swamp monster from like a swampy lake, or actually from like the sea, from like scary like dark seas. Now, of course, the team named Shadow Seas, obviously like Shadow Eyes is the leader, so I wanted to take her name Shadow and be part of the team named Shadow Seas. And obviously this team kind of deals with like the ocean a little bit, but even though some of them aren't part of the ocean, like the robot character. But I wanted to make that name because that actually sounds pretty cool. But okay, without further ado, let's get into the origin story about these characters. First up is Shadow Eyes, aka Nora Fisherman. Now, here's the thing, though, about Shadow Eyes. She's actually the great-great-granddaughter of Poseidon. You guys know Poseidon from Greek mythology. Poseidon is obviously, like, the mermaid god of, like, the ocean. But this story is technically different a little bit. There was a war between mermaids, mermans, and sirens. And Poseidon actually has the most powerful trident of all time that defeats, like, sea monsters and sea creatures. And he's actually the king of the ocean. Many years later have passed, and Nora Fisherman, aka Shadow Eyes, and her family, they're the last mermaids on the planet. And here's kind of a very shocking plot twist, though, that's probably gonna break your heart, though. Her entire family, her parents, they were all killed by Captain Villainous. And she doesn't know who ended up taking her family away from her, and she wants revenge on that person. But even though she can't find the person who ended up killing her parents, but then she starts discovering that she has the ability to actually breathe out of water, where she can actually turn into a human, but her feet are just like flippers. But that isn't until she ends up meeting a human character named Joshua, and they both actually kind of fall in love with each other. And there is obviously like a sad backstory about this. The story is slightly similar to Shadow and Maria, but Joshua, the human, he's actually trying to like protect Shadow Eyes and make sure that no one like finds out about her that she's a mermaid, because if people see her, then they're gonna think she's an evil monster. But when people find out, people try to kill Shadow Eyes. But Joshua sadly ended up sacrificing his life, and he sadly died. And so now Shadow Eyes wants revenge on the humans and wants to destroy them all, because people think she's a monster. And this story is slightly similar to the movie Nimona, where like people like didn't like her because she was like some shapeshifter. But this obviously is basically me wanting to like send out a message to people like, you know, like you look evil on the outside, but in the inside you are not evil. It's just people have different eyes, and that person was made in God's image. But Shadow Eye, she's trying to find the powerful Triton that Poseidon had to like bring back to life the monsters, the sea monsters. Next characters are Sharky and Super Orca. Now Sharky and Super Orca, they were actually just regular like shark animals and orca in the ocean, where Shadow Eyes ends up finding like a human serum that was dropped out of Captain Villainous's boat that dropped in the water, and Shadow Eyes finds it and she puts that inside of the orca and the shark, and they both turn into human looking shark characters. Next character is Charger, and I already did explain his origin story in the Super Spirit X video if you guys want to go check that out a little bit. But if you don't know, Charger was another robot that was made by Soldier, but that robot wasn't used that much. And so when Edward Wilson was shot by Soldier and almost about to die, he ends up transferring his soul, his spirit, into that orange robot, Charger. So like his soul is now inside of the robot, his soul is now possessing that robot. Next character is the Grease. I don't have that much backstory about the Grease, but the Grease, he's obviously just a random swamp monster from a swampy lake. But okay guys, that was Shadow Seas. Now let's move on to the last final villain team a little bit.